My name is Afton Thomas, and I am Associate Director for Programs here at the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. Thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you to the UN Voting Ambassadors for their vision for tonight's event, and to the Center for Community Engagement for their ongoing partnership and collaboration. Special thanks to our hosts this evening, members of the UN Voting Ambassadors, Jamiria Massey and Samarjay McGregory, and to Dr. William Tier, who is unable to be here with us this evening, but who I've had the pleasure of working with for the second year in a row for this annual event. Hopefully, it will become something that we do every year. I'll speak it into existence. Okay, and thank you to tonight's discussants, Mr. Leroy Clemons and Dr. Castel. I am looking forward to the film and discussion. Thank you to graduate students Asish Shrestha and Deja Samuel for assisting with SouthTalks, from the advertising to filming the events to ensure they are available for replay on the Center's YouTube channel. Thank you to colleagues Dr. Andy Harper and Dr. Katie McKee for their assistance this evening, and Rebecca Locke-Cleary, the Center's communications specialist, for spreading the word. Our next South Talk is Thursday, March 19th. It has just become a thing. We do 2 in 1 week. I don't know what's wrong. I know it's me. You walked from our foyer, where hopefully you enjoyed some food, and please have some more. That was provided by Pash Catering out of Lambert, Mississippi. You walk through our gallery, our Gamble Gallery, and we have a beautiful exhibit in there. The portraits were made by Rogelio Rodriguez, an Austin, Texas photographer, and that exhibit is Nuestro Mississippi. And we will have our South Talk on Thursday focused on that exhibit with a panel discussion. It is at 5:30 in this room, in that space. There will be food. That's our thing, provided by Lola's Homestead. And that event is called Portraits of Belonging, Latino Life and Legacy in Mississippi. This South Talk will feature a panel discussion with Latino activist artists and community-engaged researchers who will discuss resilience, historical impact, rootedness, and ongoing contributions of Latinos in the U.S. South. Panelists include Lorena Quiros, Executive Director of the Immigrant Alliance for Justice and Equity of Mississippi; Michael Perez, Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of Memphis and co-director of the Southern Latinx Artists Archive at the University of Mississippi, if you didn't know we had one; and Hector Baldo, artist and co-founder of the Mississippi Latinx Arts Association. That discussion will be moderated by Stephen Fafoulis, Associate Professor of Spanish and Linguistics in the Department of Modern Languages and the inaugural Faculty Laureate for the University of Mississippi, and Simone Delarmy, McMullen Associate Professor of Southern Studies in Anthropology and Faculty Co-Director of the Coalition for the Study of Race and Racism. I hope some of you can join us. Now I'm going to turn it over to your host for the evening. Thank you again, Jamiria and Samarjay.
Good evening. So, 1964, it may seem as this particular year was very long ago, but it actually was not. Almost 62 years ago, 3 young men rallied alongside their peers in Mississippi in the fight against racial discrimination in voting matters. James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, unfortunately, were killed for their activism in Neshoba County, Mississippi. Although their murderers may have believed that their crimes would be swept under the rug, they were proven wrong, as the community came together for answers, transparency, and healing. Shown in the documentary is Leroy Clemons, a Mississippi native who, like everyone else in Neshoba County, wanted answers to why these heinous murders occurred without justice. In the Center for Community Engagement, we have the honor of having Leroy Clemons here as one of the panelists for the documentary screening. Alongside him on the panel is Director of the Center for Community Engagement, Dr. Castel. Tonight's program will include discussions throughout the documentary on how we have power as a community and when there is wrong in the world to rely on community no matter what. Leroy Clemons, a lifelong resident of Philadelphia, Mississippi, is a community leader and advocate for racial healing, justice, and youth empowerment. As NAACP president and co-founder of the Philadelphia Coalition, he helped reopen the 1964 murder case of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, and advanced statewide civil rights education. Since 2010, he has directed the Neshoba County the Neshoba Youth Coalition, which has reduced dropout rates, while mentoring thousands of youth. Through cross-racial dialogue, community engagement, and his ABC approach, addressing attitudes, behaviors, and conditions, Leroy empowers communities to heal, grow, and create equitable opportunities for all. Thank you. We're going to play 3 segments. That was the first segment. And after each segment, we're going to have a panel discussion led by Dr. Castel Sweet and Mr. Leroy Clemons. Following around, we're going to have a microphone going around. If you have any questions, feel free to ask the panelists. They're more than welcome to answer your questions. And this is an open discussion, so I don't feel like it has to be linear. Whatever you feel like saying, go ahead.
So I have the first question that can get us started. So, Leroy, we just saw the community's reaction to what was unfolding in real time, which is kind of rare, particularly if we think about civil rights stories. So what does kind of the language and the things that community members were saying suggest about how the community collectively controlled or avoided the story and the truth?
Well, silence is a very powerful tool. When people are afraid to speak up for whatever reason, and in our community there were different reasons why people didn't speak up. African Americans didn't speak up because they were afraid. Many whites didn't speak up because they were also afraid, or they were part of the group that wanted to keep control and did not want to see any change come. So it was beneficial for them not to speak against what was going on, but to support it because it kept them in power, kept them in control. It made sure that their way of life was comfortable. But African Americans were like, we're sick and tired of seeing our people being killed and murdered and nothing being done about it. And so the community was divided as to the way it should move. And I'm not talking about just divided amongst black and white. It was divided way beyond racial lines, because there were some whites that felt, this is wrong, but because of fear, they wouldn't speak up. Blacks felt the same way, but one of the things I noticed in our community was we had no leadership. There was no strong black leadership that would lead it and step up and put themselves in that role, because, as you know, to accept the leadership role made you public enemy number one to the Klan, or to the people who felt that they wanted to protect the system. And so we needed somebody who had the courage to do it. And I didn't go volunteering for that job. That job sort of landed in my lap. And then it was like, okay, you've been built for this, run with it. And so my community, as I said, my community was divided, not just amongst racial lines, but culture, just power dynamics. This story is a lot more complicated than just black and white. And a lot of people have always simplified it by making it seem like it was just a black and white issue. But when I watched that segment there, what stood out to me was a lot of time we hear about a story and we say that was horrible, and then we move on. But this story and this film exposed the aftermath of what a community has to deal with when something like this happens in that community. You don't just move on. The community can't just move on, because the families have to deal with it. The pain that you saw those family members talking about. I actually spent a lot of time with those family members, all of them, not just one group, all of them. I personally witnessed the pain, what they went through, not just with the trial or the fact that it took 40 years, but this stayed with them. Miss Goodman shared a story with me how that, they were talking about the 9 bodies they found. She shared with me the story about how she got a letter from President Johnson every time they found a body. Every time they found one of those 9 bodies, she got a letter from President Johnson letting her know that it wasn't her son. But the day they found the bodies, she didn't get a letter, she didn't get a call. Her friend told her to turn on the television, and she saw them loading her son's body in the back of a hearse. Now, see, that's the kind of pain that people don't envision when they talk about this story. It's sad that 3 boys got killed and they got murdered and blah, 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 but the personal pain that those families had to go through and what my community had to go through because of it, the division, there was a lot of things that my community had to overcome and deal with because of that. And we've been dealing with it. We had dealt with that. That was the reason why we formed the Philadelphia Coalition, because for 40 years, my community had to deal with this cloud that overshadowed us. And it looked like every time it rained, that bitterness and hatred was rained down on top of us. And everywhere we went in the country, and anywhere in the country, and you tell people you from Philadelphia, they looked at you as if, look at that racist, look at that. So it was everywhere we went, and people only judged us by the fact that I was from Philadelphia, Mississippi. And that didn't matter whether I was black or white or red, it didn't make any difference. It was the fact that I was from Philadelphia, Mississippi, and I was colored with that same brush.
Whenever I look at y'all, that means it's your turn. Okay, we have one over here.
My question is about the 9 bodies that they found. Now, I'm assuming they didn't find the 3 activists in the river. They just found those 9 bodies. Were they ever identified?
Yes, 2 of them. We actually helped identify. The Philadelphia Coalition helped the brother of one of the young men to identify who they knew who the bodies were. We actually helped him get justice in that case. It was 2 young men 2 young boys from Alcorn that were out during the college break, got picked up by the Klan and was murdered. And the brother was involved. He came and talked with us, and we helped him put him on the right track. He was able to go back into where they were murdered at. They were actually able to track down the guy who did murder them, and they actually got him convicted and put in prison, and he died in prison.
And do you think at that time, a lot of black men were leaving Mississippi, and a lot of times they went missing, but I think some would think, oh, they just left and went north, and you never hear from them again. It's possible that some of those bodies would, anybody ever tried to figure out any further who they were or anything like that.
Well, you heard Ms. Chaney talk about that she knew of a lot of people being murdered in Neshoba in Mississippi that nobody ever did anything about. That was and I always talk to young people about this, and I tell them, they talk about Black Lives Matter, the movement that happened a few years ago. No, in Mississippi in the 60s and prior, the lives of black men and women had no value to white America. So you could be killed in Mississippi and nobody would ever be prosecuted. As a young man growing up in Philadelphia, I witnessed firsthand 2 black men killed. Nobody was ever prosecuted for their murders, even though there was plenty of witnesses. Nobody was ever proud. This is the environment that I grew up in, seeing black men, and I saw black men being murdered. I saw black women being raped, and nobody would ever be prosecuted over it. And especially in Philadelphia, we had 39 police officers, and every one of them was members of the Klan. So this had been normalized to see black men being killed. So when they said they found 9 bodies, that didn't rattle the black community, because we knew it was going on long before they announced it or said anything about it. So this was while it was designed to keep people silent, to keep fear at the helm, and to keep people afraid to stand up and do. And you heard Ben talk about that when they killed black men, the standard practice was to kill them, castrate them, and stuff their private parts in their mouth. And that's what you saw a lot of. It was violent. It was violent murders. And when I listen to them describe what happened on the screen, even that's not accurate. It's a lot worse than what they described.
Mr. Clemons, this is actually more of a testimonial than a question, but 2 years ago, my name is John Winnett. I'm an activist and a media producer. 2 years ago, almost to the day, I had the pleasure of getting on the bus in Oxford and coming to Philadelphia, and it was one of the most memorable experiences I've had in my very short life. That was a joke. I'm 1,000 years old. You were incredibly articulate, knowledgeable as you are tonight, but also that you made every attempt to connect with everyone who was on the bus. And I barely recognized you without the red Michigan sweatshirt hoodie you were wearing, but it's great to see you all dressed up. I can't encourage you all enough to go on this trip on Saturday morning. It was life-changing for me, and I thank you.
Thank you.
And then before we move on to the next section, Mr. Leroy, can you talk about when you first learned of the story? So I think to John's point, you do a good job of connecting when this happened versus when you got connected and involved in the coalition, and how you got connected to it and the work that you started doing 40 years after it actually happened.
Well, my connection to this story actually began in 8th grade. And my history teacher, her name was Marie Stewart, we were discussing the Civil War and the time after the Civil War, doing Reconstruction. And I was fascinated with learning doing Reconstruction about all the rights that African Americans had gained. And then a few weeks later, we're in the 1940s, and we're in the midst of Jim Crow, and all those rights that we had during Reconstruction in 1870 was gone. And I'm just like, how in the world did we lose all this gain within 70 years? And so I'm questioning that teacher. I'm just drilling her with trying to get answers. And so she suggested I go read a book. She gave me a book title, and she said, go get Witness in Philadelphia, and I want you to read that story. This was the first time that I had been introduced to the murders in Neshoba County. 8th grade. I read that book, and this is what I said. I stood up in front of my entire class and said this: when I get old enough, I'm going to do something about this. I had no idea how. I didn't know how it was going to come to fruition. But 2003, I am a member of the NAACP in Neshoba County. Several people, all my life in the community, I worked with young folks. As choir director, as baseball, softball coach, football coach, basketball coach. I was very active in the community. And so I was a member of the NAACP, and several members had been coming to me asking me if I would take the job as president of the NAACP in Neshoba County. And I kept saying no. I kept saying no. Now, I had two reasons. Why I was saying no. I knew I wanted to be involved in politics one day. I knew that. I also knew that if I chose to be the president of the NAACP in Neshoba County, I would never, ever never carry the white vote in Neshoba County. I knew that. Also, as a member of the NAACP, they would have 3-hour meetings in Neshoba County. 3 full hours of talking, and then they would do nothing. And I am the kind of man, don't give me a mission and think I'm not going to do it. If we talk about doing something, get ready. And so they kept coming to me saying this, and I kept saying no for those 2 reasons. Moving forward into 2003, we had an issue where we wanted to go to the city council and ask for them to rename a street in the city in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. Great issue. We packed out City Hall. It was packed from nothing but us. We were there in record numbers. And the president, who was the guy who was the president of the NAACP at the time, stood up, and he spoke to the council after they asked him what we there for, and he said, we're here because we want to request this street to be named in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. I was a young man, just turned 39, I think 39 or 40. And I'm sitting there listening, I'm going, that is all right. I was really proud to be there to hear this. If he had just hushed, we'd have been fine. But this is what he added to the conversation. He says, but if y'all don't want to, you don't have to. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, why are we here if this is not a request? But if y'all want to, y'all don't, It was that moment that I knew I had to step up. My community needed leadership, and nobody was doing it. And so I'm like, you know how when you look around the room and say, who's going to do it? And after a few minutes, it comes back and say, you. And so I went to the people. I told them, I said, I'll do it. So I got nominated in November of 2003, got elected, took office on January the 1st, 2004. Took the job, hit the ground running. Still not knowing that the words that I spoke in the 8th grade, how they were going to come to pass. Hit the ground running. March of 2004, I meet one of my classmates who had a white young man that had just moved back to the town. He had just bought the local newspaper. We were classmates. We worked at the newspaper together when we were young boys, stuffing newspapers and all this kind of stuff. We knew each other well. We got to talking about how people viewed our city, because he and I had both traveled some and been other places. My encounter was this. I was working with my church as the Christian education director. We competed nationally in this Bible drill competition against teams from all over the country. And a couple of years before I became the president of NAACP, we had competed against a team from California. And the first time we competed, we made it to the finals that year. We competed against them for the championship. And I mean, they beat the brakes off us. It was embarrassing. But we went back home and said, never again. So that next year when we went back, we made it to the finals again, and we had to play this team again, the same team. But this time, it was different. We went back, we prepared, we learned from our mistakes, and we beat the brakes off them. 40 years later, that team has never come back. They've never competed since. Since that day, they haven't competed since. I asked one of the team members once, I saw him a couple of years after, I said, why are you guys not competing anymore? She looked at me and she said these words, do you know what it's like to go back to California and tell them that you lost to a team from Mississippi? And that spoke volumes to me. It said, look at the way people view you guys from Mississippi, especially from Philadelphia, Mississippi, because I know that probably made it worse. They had to go back to California and tell them, we got beat by a team from Philadelphia, Mississippi, of all places. And he was sharing a story with me that he was going to these newspaper conferences, and he was encountering the same type of resistance because of who he was, where he was from. And we were like, but that's not the Philadelphia that we're living in today. That doesn't resemble the place that we live. The 1964 Philadelphia was not the 2004 Philadelphia. So we were like, we've got to do something to change this. And that's how we came up with the idea of forming the Philadelphia Coalition. And from there, we reached out, and I told him, I said, look, I tell you what, if you can get the white people in the room, I can get the black folks and the Native Americans. And that's what we did. And we went out and we worked together. We ended up with 30 people in the room. By May of 2004, we're standing in front of the Attorney General for the state of Mississippi asking him to reopen this case, a 40-year-old murder case. Within 5 months, we're standing in front of the Attorney General saying, can you reopen this case? He answered us. We asked him on a Wednesday. He responded on a Saturday and said, I'll reopen it. And we had the 40th anniversary in June of 2004. We had 1,800 people there, including the governor of Mississippi, who called and said, can I come? He came. We had an incident where he's coming on stage and he's greeted by John Lewis. And as they're shaking hands, between the picture that they kept, there's a picture of him shaking John Lewis's hand, and sitting between the two of them is Miss Goodman looking at both of them. This is the picture that went out all over the state. All resistance from the statewide failed. All the resistance that we were facing statewide, because they saw that picture, It just evaporated. So now, it was like, we got a clean shot for this. So we moved, we took off. We took off working together. January, 1 year from the date I took office, we got an indictment. 1 year, we got an indictment. And January 2005, Edgar Ray Killen gets indicted. Now, what people don't understand was, there were only 8 men still alive. Of the 20 that was involved, there were only 8 still alive. All 8 names were presented to the grand jury. The grand jury only came back with an indictment against the one man, which was the Klan leader. And then June of 2005, June 21st, the exact date of the murders, 41 years to the exact date of the murders, we got a conviction. That's what real leadership does when it's willing to step up. And you can't let fear rule you. You can't let fear shrink you. And my grandmother had always instilled in me as a little boy, when they finally integrated the schools in Mississippi in 1970, even though Brown versus Board of Education was passed in 1954, Mississippi didn't honor it to 1970. So at that point, I was in 3rd grade. I got sent to an all-white school, and every morning when I got dressed to go to school, my grandmother stood at that door. And as I walked out that door, the last word she said to me was, "Son, don't you ever let them see fear in you." And she instilled that into me. And when I started doing this thing with the Youth Coalition, those words stayed with me. I walked into that with no fear. I knew the consequences. I knew the consequences of my decision. And let's just say it like this. I've run for public office 5 times. I'm one for 5. And every time, I've never won the white vote in Neshoba County. Never, ever, 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 ever gotten the white vote. I mean, when you break down the numbers, it's straight across demographic lines. Even though everybody loves me, they won't vote for me. I mean, I coach the kids. I coach the kids. I work with the kids. I spend time with their kids, love me to death. I got folks that I graduated from high school with that won't vote for me because they going to strictly vote according to their lines.
So I think that's a good intro to our next section of the interview. Perfect timing. At that time.
Like I said, the community had 2 different ideas of what say just like freedom itself, what freedom meant. Freedom meant something different to the black community as it did to the white community. To us, it was about dignity, about the ability to vote, about being able to feel like we belonged in a community. Many in the white community, on the other hand, felt like this is about protecting our way of life that made them feel comfortable. They didn't want to be discomforted by addressing what was going on. So there was a lot of people that were just complicit by being silent. They just felt like it's not something I want to deal with. And the black community was afraid to deal with it. The white community just didn't want to deal with it. And even some who felt the way the African Americans did, they were just afraid of losing their way of life. And a lot of people say, well, they should have did something. Well, think about it like this. If it was your family and your livelihood on the line, if you spoke up, what would you do? Would you be willing to risk your family's livelihood, the future of your children, your business, all of the things? Would you be willing to put that on the line to speak up in a community where you knew you were going to be ostracized if you did it? And that was the decision that a lot of people had to make. And a lot of people weren't willing to make that choice. And even African Americans, even though they were being mistreated, they felt like, that things were wrong and they needed to make changes, but nobody was willing to step up and take the leadership role. Everybody was afraid. Nobody was willing to do it. And like I said, it wasn't my choice to say, I didn't run around waving my hand and said, I want to do it. It was like you don't have a choice. Somebody's got to do it. And so I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I tell people I was president of the NAACP for 12 years. It was the loneliest 12 years of my life. Leadership is a lonely job. When you step into that role, you got to be willing to do what it takes, in spite, whether you got support or not. You've got to have the courage to do it. And because of the way my grandmother instilled that thing in me about no fear, I just didn't see a reason to stop. Because my thing was, I led a youth group today on this tour in Philadelphia before I came here, and we talked about this, that when those young people came here, from the Freedom Riders came into Mississippi, those were young college students. Students were from wealthy families. They could have been on the beach somewhere. They could have been in Miami on the beach. They could have been somewhere enjoying their lives, but instead they chose to come to Mississippi to help my people register to vote, open up freedom schools, help my people learn to read and write. This was a choice that they made. Even after the 3 young men were murdered, they were given a choice. They were asked, okay, 3 of our people have died. If any of you want to leave, you can do it. And those young people joined arms and said, no, we are going to Mississippi. And I'm thinking, if those young people, and they had no protection from the law. They came to Mississippi when they had 0 protection. How could I say no when I had protection? I had a measure of it. I didn't have a lot, but I had a measure of it. How could I say no? How could I be afraid? And so, as a community, watching my community divided, watching my community being torn apart by this, looking at what our young people was going to inherit in the future if nothing was done, I had to do something. And that's what drove me. That was the thing that nobody ever understood. What is the thing that's driving him to do this? I just could not see another generation have to deal with what we dealt with. And I teach young folks now, please understand this. When I do the tours, we don't focus on just what happened. I tell them up front, we're going to talk about what happened. But more importantly, we're going to talk about why it happened and what you guys as young people can do to ensure it never happens again. And we also talk about what's going on in the country today, how that because of silence, because of indifference, nobody is willing to stand up and challenge what they see is playing out in this country. History is repeating itself, and we're turning a blind eye to it. I'm a World War II history buff. I've always been fascinated with how in the world did that little old man lead a whole world into a war, trying to build what he called the perfect society when he didn't even fit in. But people followed him. That has always fascinated me, how he was able to do that. Today I'm watching this similar stuff playing out in this country, and nobody seems to be alarmed by it. And that it just blows my mind how this country is like we don't see it. That's what was happening in Philadelphia. Everybody knew what was going on, but everybody was ignoring it for whatever reason. Everybody had different reasons why they were doing it. And it troubles me when I see it in the country today.
I know we're only playing clips because we want to give time for the wonderful human being in front of us, but I highly, highly, highly recommend watching the entire thing. You can find it. I know for sure it's on Amazon Prime, so you can find it online. We also have the DVD now in the Center for Community Engagement. But I like the way that the film presents so many different perspectives in their own voices, in their own opinions, in their own thoughts in the film in such a beautiful way that's kind of hard to do in documentaries, of getting some of this raw reactions to things, footage of things, but particularly to see there's a good bit of footage of Edgar Ray Killing in the documentary, sharing his honest thoughts and opinions on things. And so it also shows how well of a job the documentarians did of getting their trust for him to share, and not just him, but a lot of other people in the community to hear their perspective. So the question for you, Leroy, is thinking about that perspective that Killen was sharing, not just his direct reactions to what was happening in the courtroom 40 years later, but even his perspective on the story of what happened, why it happened, people's reaction to it. And they kind of alluded in the commentary of some of the community members that he wasn't the only one. So how did the things in the commentary that he was adding and his story reflect the broader community feelings, sentiments, perspectives, thoughts about the incident that happened in 64?
I'm going to just start off with this, that Mickey Dickoff and Tony Pagano, the producers of this documentary, got unprecedented access to Edgar Ray Killen and his family. They actually lived in his home while they was producing this documentary. And he spoke freely to them, not holding back anything. And there's a lot that happened in those clips that just transpired that really, I really wish I had time to really talk about every point, because I think when you watch that, it's like, okay, this happened, but there was so much more that went on behind the scenes. When you see Edgar Ray Killen, this is who Edgar Ray Killen is. He's talked all the time. In the midst of the trial, he was just constantly pouring out everything. There are a lot of things that's not in here, in the documentary, that he would just say. There was an interesting clip in there where he says, after he got indicted, he says he couldn't believe it because 3 of the nice jurors had sent him a message and told him he's not lying. He's not lying. And when you saw the clip where I came out of the courthouse, and I'm highly upset because now the vote is 6-6, the reason why I was upset was because that was Monday. On Friday before, the jury had been sequestered. Well, because Father's Day was coming up on Sunday, the judge, in his wisdom, decided to let the jury go home to be with their families over the Father's Day weekend. Well, they took a vote on Friday before they left. It was 10 guilty, 2 not guilty. When they came back on Monday, they deliberated all day, and they went to the judges and they said, now we 6-6. 4 jurors switched after that weekend. And what we found out from those jurors were that there were people who came to their homes and shared stuff with them about this story. And they came back on Monday and was deliberating about what people came by and shared with them over the weekend. And that's why I was upset, because I knew that was going to happen if he allowed them to go home. Because in the environment in Neshoba County was very tense. I mean, when I tell you tensions were at an all-time high, somebody asked me, they said, Leroy, what was it like leading the Philadelphia Coalition? I told them it was like carrying a case of nitroglycerin through a minefield. We knew, Jim and I knew, that if we messed up, we were going to set race relations back by 50 years in Neshoba County. That's the weight we was carrying on our shoulders, knowing that if we messed up, and we were dealing with some volatile, when I tell you some volatile people, when he says, you remember the clip where he accuses the mayor of this, not the mayor of the city, that's not the mayor, it was one of the gentlemen, it was Edgar Ray Killen's brother. He accused the district attorney father of being in the Klan. Well, we knew we had Klan members on the coalition. And when we were confronted by it, we had a Klansman come all the way from Arkansas, came to one of our meetings, stood up in the meeting and told us, there's nothing to this coalition because you guys got Klansmen on the coalition. My response to him was this: that just shows we're all inclusive. How are you going to solve a problem and you don't have all the people at the table? We wanted them in the coalition because we could change their attitudes. We could change the others. So we didn't exclude anybody from being a member of the coalition. But I had some of the most volatile people in that room that you ever want to see. I mean, if you want to start a fight on the coalition, and I'm not talking about a fight between the blacks and whites, I'm talking about a fight just between 2 white people in the room. Come into the room and do this. Jimmy Carter, fight. Ronald Reagan, fight. That's how tense it was. See, people think it's all about race. It's not. It's all sorts of things that divide people. Politics, culture, income, hair color, all of these things. It's not just about skin color. And so when you're walking through this, people in the community were divided on all different levels. It wasn't just color. Everybody thinks it was just black and white. It was not. It was all sorts of issues why people didn't like each other in the room. One African-American lady by the name of Nettie Cox. I knew Miss Nettie, grew up with Miss Nettie, been around Miss Nettie all my life as a child. One thing I knew about Miss Nettie, this woman hated white people. As a child, I never heard Miss Nettie say a positive thing about a white person in my life. If you want to get her fired up, just mention a white person in Philadelphia, and she would go left, as soon as you mention her name. Because the coalition was open to the public, lo and behold, by our third meeting, somebody walks in the door, and it's Miss Nettie. And I had a white gentleman in the room that, he had a loose mouth. Sometimes the coalition created a safe space in the room where people could feel comfortable, speaking their truths. And he was very comfortable speaking his truth. Just very comfortable with it. And it just comes out. Well, when Miss Nettie showed up that night, I thought, oh, Lord, this is not going to be good. But she didn't sit in the circle. We sat in a circle. She didn't sit with us in the circle. She sit over in the corner. And she sitting over there scoured up the whole night, just mad as a hornet sitting over there in that corner. And I was nervous all night because I was thinking if he speaks his truth, she's going to lose it. I was on pins and needles all night long. The meeting ended. She went home. I was really excited. I came back the next week. When I walked in, she was over there in that corner already, sitting in that corner, just scoured up. And I thought, oh, tonight's probably going to be the night. But we made it through the meeting. The next week, we came back. I came into the room I was looking for her. As soon as I walked in the door, I'm looking in that corner to see if she was over there. To my surprise, there was nobody there. And I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be great tonight. Then I sort of scanned the room. Of all the seats in the room that she could have chose to sit in, she's sitting next to the white guy, right beside him. And I'm sitting there going, oh, tonight is going to be the night. We made it through the meeting. And I'm telling you what we were doing. We were not planning anything. We were sharing stories. What we call it today, we were building relationships. We were strengthening relationships. And we were building stories, allowing people to talk about what it was like growing up in Philadelphia, what was their highest hopes for Philadelphia, what are some things they wish they would love to see happen in Philadelphia. People were just sharing their own personal stories. Nope, not working on anything. We weren't trying to plan anything. We weren't trying to fix anything. We weren't trying to come up with anything. Miss Nettie had sat through 2 meetings where she heard black, white, and Native Americans talk about what they wanted for Philadelphia. And that resonated with her. And that's why she kept coming back. Well, the third meeting, she's sitting in the circle now. As the meeting concluded that night, we get ready to go home, I'm going out the door. And somebody taps me on the shoulder. And I turn around and it's Miss Nettie. And this is what she said to me. She said, Leroy, white people are all right. When she said that, I almost jumped up now. Because I knew that if we could change Miss Nettie, if we could change her attitude, we could change anybody in that room. She went on to become the first African American to run for mayor in the city of Philadelphia. She campaigned in white neighborhoods. Her and this white guy became the best of friends. When I tell you, when I'm talking about the best of friends in the meetings, I would have to stop the meeting sometime to say something to them about acting up, playing with each other, and tell them to calm down. And Nettie shared her story. She shared why she was the way she was. She said, when I was in the 60s, I loved to wear my dashikis. She was a school teacher, and she wanted to wear her dashikis to work. Well, unfortunately, every time she did it, she got fired by a white administrator. So as a result, she had developed a hatred toward white people because they wouldn't let her wear her dashiki and just happened to be a white person that fired her every time. That's why she hated them. But I never knew that story until she came into the coalition and shared it. These are the type of stories that kept coming up in those meetings. People kept sharing. And it was the first time that white people started to hear how black folks were affected, but it was also the first time that black people started hearing how white folks felt about what happened. And Native Americans talking about how they were affected by what happened. And people started to find empathy toward each other and the stories, and it deepened the relationships in the room. Because at the time, we didn't know what was coming. We didn't know what we was going to deal with coming down. We didn't know we was going to deal with a man like this. And you saw how he went out to me saying that I was nothing but a troublemaker and everything like that. They just loved me in Philadelphia. He turned around, his brother told us during the middle of the trial that he turns around. I didn't realize he was sitting in front of us. And he turns around, he tells us, now when my brother dies, none of y'all invited to the funeral. Thought, okay, that's fine. I didn't want to go anyway, but, and I'll tell you some more about that, but it's a lot. Yes.
We got one, Miss Barbara. We're coming.
I'm curious about what life is like right now in Philadelphia and Neshoba. Having had this coalition and all the storytelling, as I understand it, none of that ever resulted in you getting a white vote. So what's the situation in terms of racial justice and economic justice in Philadelphia and Neshoba County now?
I am so glad that you asked that question. I am so glad that you went there. Philadelphia in 2026 does not even come close to resembling what it was in 1964. We work together across racial lines on all issues. Today, Philadelphia is I believe the 12th safest city in Mississippi. We have very little crime in Philadelphia. You can leave your doors open. You can leave your cars unlocked. The crime level there is so low that there's nothing to report. We don't have a lot of gun violence. Our young people are not getting in trouble. A testament. We got one of my young folks that I work with sitting back there with in front of that green jacket, and she's here at Ole Miss doing her thing. But I remember when she went she spoke at Harvard. She spoke at Harvard a while back. She did a presentation. I don't know what she did, but I got a call from a colleague of mine, and she says, Leroy, I'm sitting here listening to a young lady that says she's from Philadelphia, Mississippi. I know she's been around you. And I said, how do you know that? Because she speaks just like you. And I said, I already know who you're talking about. She was one of the earliest members in the coalition that was there for the 6 years. When we opened it up to 7th graders, she joined, and she was there for 6 years. I'm not surprised at all what she's doing. But when you talk about where we are in Philadelphia today, economic development and all of that, we are making great strides. We are starting, our school district now is one of the top school districts. We made tremendous stride. Our graduation rate, I think they advertised a couple of weeks ago that it was the highest, we had the highest graduation rate in the history of the school district. Our kids are getting jobs. And the beautiful thing about what's happening in Philadelphia is our children are going off to college and getting degrees and coming back home. They're moving back. Our kids are not leaving Philadelphia. The school system now, the majority of the black teachers who are teaching in Philadelphia school district are from our youth coalition. These are students who grew up, went off and got their degrees, came back home. They're teaching the next generation. So what I was trying to build was a leadership pipeline. And that's what we're seeing now. Young people who are going, I can't do everything, but think about what 50 Mr. Leroys can do spread out over Neshoba County. Also, one of the young men who was part of the coalition, he's now the head of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. He's a tribal chief. The mayor that we had for 16 years was a member of the coalition. We are in key positions of power in the city. And we're making decisions that's affecting the entire population, not just one sector anymore. And whether I ever get elected in office or not, it doesn't matter because my influence is still there. I'm the mayor.
Are white folks, voters, electing other black officials to?
Yeah, they have. They just hadn't voted. They just want to elect me because, as they put it, I'll just say what some of them said. we can't control Leroy. And that's true. They can't. Because I'm going to do what's right. I don't care. I really don't care. I'm going to do what's right. And that doesn't matter. You know, there are
So you
still
don't have
people.
racially polarized voting in Neshoba County?
They vote party lines. I mean, like they do nationally. It doesn't matter if you put the dog catcher name on there. It just depends on what that letter is behind that name. And that's how people are going to vote. When people go to the polls, they don't care. They don't know anything about the candidates. They just vote strictly party lines. Because on the other side, too, we get the same thing. We get people elected that you be like, oh, my goodness, why in the world did you guys? What were you thinking? Because they had that letter behind their name. That's not a black and white thing. That's a statewide, citywide, local problem, national problem that people don't educate themselves about candidates. They just vote those letters. But they know me in Philadelphia. It's not like they don't know me. And the people in power who want to stay in power do not want to see Leroy Clemons in charge because they know Leroy is going to challenge inequities in the city. And it doesn't matter who it's coming from. And so they'd rather keep me silent than to let me be in a leadership role. Now, and I'm fine with that because it doesn't stop me from doing the work that I'm doing. It never will.
Hey, Leroy. Cade Smith. Leroy and I have been friends for a better part of 12 years. And so you mentioned your motivations kind of early on, and some of those are in the documentary around truth-telling, seeking justice, you know, from 8th grade, and then addressing the reputational taint of Mississippians, both black and white Mississippians. So great job on the truth-telling, wonderful job on justice on this issue for one person. What about the impact on the reputation of Mississippians, Philadelphians, black and white citizens?
I'm glad you asked that because everybody thought that this was about, everybody thought this whole thing was about getting one man and locking up Edgar Ray Killen. That is not that was not even our intentions when we started. It was never about him. And what we tried to explain to everybody doing while it was going on, that the news media came in, they tried to make it about Edgar Ray Killen. It was never about Edgar Ray Killen. It was always about our community coming together. Our community acknowledging the wrongs that had taken place in our community and speaking with one voice saying, we're not going to sit silent anymore and allow this type of stuff to happen in our city. That's what it was all about, changing the attitudes of our people as a city to stand up and say, enough is enough. This is not going to be allowed to continue. And that was what the Attorney General, that's what moved him, is when he came to Philadelphia and sit in that room with us and he heard black, white, Native Americans all talking with one voice on one accord saying, we want these people out of our community. Do what you got to do to get it done. And I think that's what moved him we did this we met with him on a Monday night. We did a call for justice on Wednesday night. And on Saturday night, he announced, I'm going to reopen the case after 40 years. And he did it. He moved on it. And he saw that the city, the people in the city were speaking. Now, somebody asked me about where we are. We are doing wonderful, but let me just say this. Not everybody will ever be on board with what you're trying to do. As a leader, you better understand that when you stand up to do what's right, you're going to have somebody. And I tell people all the time, for Philadelphia to finally get to where it needs to go, we're going to have a few more funerals. Because some people are just going to die just like Edgar Ray Killen. He died like he was. He died still being the same way. He never showed an ounce of remorse. Never once. I even talked to the lady when they rolled him into the penitentiary, down to Parchment into the penitentiary. And you know, Parchment has a large African-American population. The first day they rolled him in his wheelchair, they said they rolled him into the general population. He looked up and this is the exact words he said. It's too many niggers up in here. And at that point, they had to put him keep him confined away from the other inmates. And they assigned a young African-American young lady to watch over him and to wheel him around and get him to every place he went. I had an opportunity to interview her a few years ago. She said, "Miss Leroy, I thought my name was Black B. And you know what the B stands for. It's not beautiful." She said, every time he wanted me, that's what he would call me. "Come here, Black B." Anytime he needed anything, "Come here, Black B." I asked her, I said, "What happened on the day he died?" She said he was sitting in his wheelchair. She noticed he was struggling. He fell out of the wheelchair on the floor. She rushed to see what he was going on with him. She said, she rolled him over. He looked up on his deathbed, and basically, and this is what he said to her: "Come here, Black B." And I asked her, I said, "What did you do?" She didn't answer. She didn't answer. What would you have done? That might be the better question. What would you have done? Don't answer, don't say it out loud. Because I already know where my mind is, but that was the kind of man he was. He never once showed remorse. That documentary, that last clip we saw, started off with them asking him, did he have any remorse for those 3 boys? And in his answer, he says, if they had been good Christians, I would have felt some way about it. But since they weren't Christians, 2 of them were Jewish and the other was black, they weren't good Christians. So the Lord understands why, I had to do what I had to do. And he's okay with me. And he tells me, he says that, the Lord's okay with my judge, what he did. The Lord going to be okay with it. Because he know I did what I had to do. And he was talking about maintaining a system. He was talking about maintaining that system. And that's what it was all about. And it talked about, there's a clip in there that talks about coming down south, that Freedom Summer was about bringing these young folks down from up north to come down south to train young black men like me to go rape white girls. Now, you got to be pretty ignorant to believe that as African-American young men, that we would have let somebody come from up north and teach us to go out and rape white girls in Mississippi in a place that we had to continue to live. Where you in a state where a black man like me could have been killed for just looking at a white girl, more or less raping one. But this is what he preached to his men, and they believed it, and they followed it. That level of ignorance is unfathomable. But when I'm seeing happening in this country today, I see the same thing playing out again, and people are just following it like it's, and that I've told y'all before I am very concerned that we don't know that we're not remembering the lessons that have been taught to us in the past, and we are ignoring it. We're being silent. And one thing I found out in Philadelphia, silence is what breeds this type of stuff. When people are silent about it for whatever reason, you are complicit in allowing it to happen, and that's what happened in my community. Because when it first started, nobody said anything. As it continued to get worse, nobody said anything. When it got out of hand and it became a national incident, still nobody wanted to say anything. And you have to understand, in my city, those murders took place in 1964. I was born in 1962. I grew up in Philadelphia. Not one conversation do I remember being around hearing anybody talk about these murders. Black, white, Native American, family members. My own grandmother didn't tell me about this. If it hadn't been for my 8th grade teacher, I never would have known. And even after I read the book, I never then witnessed anybody in my city talking about these murders. Not until 2004. Nobody, it was like it was the best kept secret in the world, and nobody wanted to discuss it. It was like we just gonna stay silent, and it'll just go away. If we don't say anything, it's just gonna go away. It just kept getting worse. And the next generation after generation was being affected by that silence. My generation was affected by it. Think about it, I didn't want my children to be affected by this anymore. I didn't want my grandchildren to be affected by it. So that's why I stood up and said, somebody got to change this. And that was the purpose of what we did. It had nothing to do with Edgar Ray killing, because had we got him convicted or not, important to me that we changed the attitude of the people in my city, and that we stood together on one accord, saying with one voice, we will not allow this to continue in our city. Now, and I think it paid dividends in the state of Mississippi, because I think other communities woke up and started saying, oh, if they can do it in Philadelphia, we can do it here. Mm-hmm. But I've seen it done. I've seen it happen all over the United States. Everywhere I've been, including now South Africa, I've been to South Africa, had an opportunity to do it there. I've been to Ireland. I work with the IRA in Ireland. I saw two men that never hugged each other, never spoken to each other. I saw that by the time we finished, they were embraced. Had me in the middle. But I've seen it work, and I know it works. Communities can change. It's a process, but they can change. And yes, things are great. Things are much better in Philadelphia now. We're able to work through any incident. If something happened in Philadelphia today, we could have a diverse group of people in the room in about an hour to address it. The last shooting we had, that's what we did. We came together as a community, black, white, and Native American. We had it worked out. We ain't had a shooting like that since. So I know it works. Our graduation rates are up. Our teen pregnancy rates are down. We've had tremendous success with that. We've seen a 45% decrease in teen pregnancy in Philadelphia. The Youth Coalition that Ayanna was part of, when we founded, we had the 9th highest teen pregnancy rate in the state of Mississippi, in Neshoba County. African American teen pregnancy rate was even higher, the highest of all. Today, it's the lowest in the county. It's the lowest rate, it's way below the state average, but it's also the lowest in Neshoba County, and it has remained that way over the last 10 years. And it comes from using the same model, working with young people, getting them to understand we don't teach contraceptives, we don't teach just say no, we don't teach abstinence, we teach them critical thinking skills. How do you think your way out of this situation? How do you avoid these situations? What are the consequences of my decision? The choices that you make. I can talk a long time, so I better stop. Let y'all get some more questions.
I really didn't have a question, but I have a response to the question that she asked. I've been to Philadelphia maybe 3-4 times. First time watching every little dirt road, there and back, because I know the story. The second time, I'm sure you're familiar with the little resort outside of that. I can't pronounce it, but everything went well. But the third time, the friendliness, the over-friendliness made me nervous. Not so much as that there was a fear, but I couldn't connect the two. Because the people, and it wasn't just black people, it was everybody. It wasn't just young people, it was older. And when I say not just friendly, when you sat down to eat, they're at another table, they're hauling across the room, talking to you as if you, well, really, if y'all just like y'all just got out of church together. And it took us a minute to wrap our head around that, but to respond to what she said and what you said about it, I can see that change.
It's authentic. What you experienced is what everybody experienced when they come to Philadelphia today. They're just shocked. If you go to a ball game, if you go to a youth ball game, you're going to be shocked. Everybody is sitting together. Everybody's laughing, having a good time. You would think we all was from one family. You think it was a family reunion. The way everybody, and that is all over the city, in every business. And if there's an incident, say if you were to come to Philadelphia, you were mistreated, and you were to say, call me and say, Mr. Leroy, I went to this place and I was treated this way, I can promise you the next time you come back, you won't have that experience because we're going to deal with it. We're going to deal, it's going to be dealt with. And it's an accountability system that we have in the city where we expect everybody to conduct themselves in a certain way. But we don't have to deal with that because it's just natural now. It has become part of the DNA and part of the culture in Philadelphia. But that didn't happen by accident. That was built through relationships. And people are, it's easy to be nice to people when you feel like you belong. And that's what we've worked on, trying to create a sense of belonging for everybody in the city. And people love it because it's safe. I mean, we have older ladies out walking at 5:30 in the morning. They're not worried about anybody bothering them. I can assure you none of the young people are going to bother them because they don't want to have to deal with Mr. Leroy. I would go to the jail, I would go to the school, it doesn't matter where I have to go. And they'll tell you that when they get in trouble, the one person they worried about the most showing up is Mr. Leroy. because every child in that city is held accountable. And we will address anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna stop. The last time we had a shooting, and it's been several years, but we had a young man had ordered a pizza. The pizza delivery driver showed up with the pizza, and some young men out front got to shooting, and ended up shooting the man who ordered the pizza and killed him. And these were young African-American young boys. About 14 boys that was out there involved in the shooting. Well, long before they went to trial and anything happened, I called every last one of them. I had them to beat at the NYC Center in Philadelphia. And I had them to bring their parents. I got 14 little boys in there that's been involved in a shooting with their parents sitting in the room, and we had a very frank conversation. And I laid something out to the parents, that something like this. I'm not advocating locking up your children. I don't want to see your children go to jail. But there ain't no way I'm going to allow your children to shoot up this city. So either you get them under control or Mr. Leroy will. If you can't handle them, bring them to NYC. I'll handle them. And I don't think we've had a shooting since then. But it's about being there, being accountable, that young people know that you're serious. The one thing I tell people, you can't fool young people. Now, I can play tricks and games with older people. You cannot fool these young folks. They can see through when you're not authentic. And if you try to fool them, they can see right through it. They might not say a word, but they can see. Those young folks in Philadelphia know I care about them. They know I love them. And I'm not trying to, do things to hurt them. I'm trying to make sure they have their life. They have the life that they expect. And I can't win them all over, but I win the ones I can.
I think we have one more question.
Yes. First, I wanted to thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your personal transformation as well as informing us about the transformation of Neshoba County. So my question is, I kind of have a long history with the NAACP, and I know the model that we typically use as a NAACP branch, but yours seems to be just a little different. So I wanted to ask you, what recommendations would you have to mobilize such efforts in other communities, particularly communities that may be a little larger than Neshoba County?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it. It's the same thing. It's a process. You have to have a leader who is more invested in outcomes than power. If to be a leader in that, especially in the African American community, one of the reasons why we struggle is because we have so few people that's willing to step into that role for the right reason. And if you're going to do it, you got to do it for the right reason, because there's no glory in it. There's no money in it. There's no power really in it. It's a full-time, unappreciative job that you do. When I did it for 12 years. You would have thought I was at a full-time job. And people act like I was getting paid to be the president. And they were calling me all times of the night from other cities. I had people come from other cities. And they would say, and I would ask, but don't you guys have a branch in your city? And this is what they was telling me. Yeah, but we know you get things done. But, it takes leadership. At the end of the day, it takes leadership. And what I tell other communities that want to start it, when you go search for that leader, don't look for somebody that's, because they got degrees. Don't look for somebody who's not busy. You find somebody that's doing stuff. That's the person you want. Because a lazy person is not going to change just because you gave them a title. You need to find somebody who is about getting things done and don't mind doing it, investing in what they believe in. I cared about my community. I cared about this, bringing not just the black community together. I cared about somebody who could connect the black and white Native American community. And I knew I had the ability to do that. I had the relationship skills to connect all three communities. And that's what you have to have. It's not about just one community, because we're working for the whole. It's making the whole, it's making your community whole again and not being divided.
Well, I'll definitely thank you all for coming. And I want to say a special thank you to our student ambassadors. I'm going to highlight them. particularly given all the things that Mr. Leroy is talking about with youth. And to be completely transparent, they organize this from top to bottom. They identify the person. They identify the questions that I'm reading. These are all from the ambassadors. The week of things to do, so please come out to the rest of the week. That's from our ambassadors. The trivia night, that's tomorrow. I'm trying to remember the itinerary. The trip that's on Saturday. Papa Mississippi, they identified who they wanted for Papa Mississippi to come. They stalked him online till they found him, got him to agree to come, arranged it all. So again, thinking about youth, I think you're witnessing that by you being here because of the youth and the things that they are saying, even though y'all are really not that young. But so thank you to all of the things that you're doing in your leadership for bringing us here today together.
I'm looking forward to those of you who come down on Saturday. You're going to have a tour of your life. It's going to be an experience I think you never going to forget. Before we go, I know my NYC member, former NYC member sitting in the back, I know she had a question for me, and I wanted to give her an opportunity to ask me her question.
Hey everybody, my name is Adana Jones. I am in the master's program here in the Southern Studies Department. I have a bachelor's in history, blah, 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 blah. I was in a class, it's about heritage tourism, Castel in there, and one of the things that we're talking about is like investing in communities and how do we see it change over time. And one of the things that I said I brought up when I was like coming for full circle is that I was in NYC and like I don't really think that Mr. Leroy or like what he was doing, it didn't see the return until I graduated from college in 2020 with a history degree. And so like it took me going to high school, junior college, 4 years or whatever, you know. And so like it just takes time to get to a place.
It does.
And he's not like just fluffing us up and saying like Neshoba County has changed. I couldn't even imagine what it was like before I was 98. I can't even imagine. It's a really safe place, love it. I love hometown. Question, if you talked about being in the recipe or being the president of that, you knew that you probably weren't going to get elected into like certain positions or things like that. What do you say to people like me who I've done community organizing work all over the state? This degree that I'm about to get is very liberal, if you will. And so just doing a lot of things that aren't gonna appease a lot of folks. And so what do you say to people who potentially want to be in politics, but may not have the opportunity because of the other passions that they have? And so do you give it up because you have your passions and you can figure out other ways to be impactful or influence the world, or do you keep trying to be a part of the system of politics, if you will?
First of all, let me say this. I will never, ever tell you to give up because I don't care how people feel about me in Neshoba County. I'm going to run for mayor till the Lord call me home. And I plan to win the next election. So you never give up. What do you say to young people that's in that position? You got to make a decision. Is this what you really care about? Or is this something that's just a hobby? If it's a passion, go for it. Because that's the difference between successful leaders and leaders who fail. Leaders who are passionate don't do it for the power. They don't do it for the attention. They do it because it's the right thing to do. And when you say, when I work with you guys, a lot of the young people that was in part of NYC that's older today did not understand what was going on in that room when they were in that room. They thought Mr. Leroy just bringing us together, we just talking, we doing this. Had no idea. Let me tell you what I was doing, planting seeds. They didn't know. I was planting seeds. They didn't know. I knew they were going to grow up, that the seeds were going to mature one day, and they were going to be shocked. She's not the only one that can testify to that. There's a lot of young folks that came through NYC today that's in positions that they look back now and say, I didn't understand what was going on. They didn't need to. I just needed them to be in the room. If I can get them in the room, I'm going to plant that seed. And now I'm watching them come up, and every day I have, people ask me, so, Ms. Leroy, why are you so excited about what you do? When I see young people like her and see what they're doing today, that is my reward. That's why I did it. Not because I was trying to be I did it because people, I wanted to see them, I wanted to give them the opportunity I never had as a child. Nobody worked with me. Nobody shared with me. Nobody tried to plant seeds in me. And as a result, I had to learn a lot of things through trial and error. But I didn't want them to have to do that. I wanted to create a pathway for them where they could be successful. If they made the right choices, there's no stopping them. And there's no doubt in my mind what she's going to be doing by the time she get my age is going to be amazing. And she's not going to be the only one. But that's a testament to what I'm talking about when I look at our city and where we've come from. And when they can stand up and say, our city, and they can see the difference in our city, you're making a difference. And it starts one child at a time. But you got to be passionate. I'll tell anybody, every time people ask me about how do you pick a leader, find somebody who's passionate. Because trust me, if they came to Philadelphia, when they came to Philadelphia and said we're going to start the Philadelphia Coalition, and they would have had to pick a leader from the black community to lead the movement, I would have never got picked. My name would have never came up. It wouldn't even came on the radar. There was about 10, 20, 15 other people they probably would have picked in front of me. I was doing the work. I was doing it without recognition. I wasn't doing it to be seen. I wasn't doing it for pictures. I wasn't doing it for power. I was doing it because it needed to be done. So I wouldn't have been the person they picked. But things, I always say, what they say, gold and stuff always float to the top. When you just do what you're supposed to do. You're going to come to the top. You ain't got to do nothing. And it just works. But passion. When you guys hiring people that's going to work with young folks, quit looking at degrees. Hire you somebody that's passionate. Because these folks that's got these degrees going to quit when the money drops. When the money stops, they stop. But a passionate person, do you think I really get paid to do what I do in Philadelphia? Oh, nope, don't care. Don't really care. I'll do it for free. Don't make me no difference.
So thank you, Leroy, for driving up tonight. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, Southern Studies, for hosting us. I know there's more food left because I saw the plates and y'all plates were not full enough. So please go back and get some more. And Mr. Leroy, stick around a little bit if you have some more questions.